How's it going, everybody? Sean Ross here, and I am finally going to be on time with my review on the latest My Hero Academia chapter, and it feels very, very good. We are on chapter 160, entitled Highway, and I absolutely enjoyed and loved this chapter, having our League of Villains stepping back into the story once again. And I don't know about you guys, but I was in complete awe of just how much of a badass our League of Villains were in this chapter, from Shigaraki to Dabi to Mr. Compress, even having that little section at the very beginning of this chapter with Toga and Twice, even Spinner being basically the driver of this whole operation. I loved every minute of it. But this chapter in particular is definitely Shigaraki's chapter. This chapter in particular definitely shows the growth that his character has gone on through these past 160 chapters. Remember back in the beginning, and especially during the invasion of USJ, just how much of a brat Shigaraki was, and whenever something did not go his way, he would just whine and complain and immediately just give up? That is not the same character that we are kind of seeing right now in this chapter. This new Shigaraki that now has conviction and now actually has a league following his orders and every move. I would not want to get in his way, and this chapter demonstrated very, very well that once Overhaul crossed his path at the very beginning of this arc, Shigaraki held that grudge and was set on, just basically making an example of Overhaul. And the fact of what he did to him in this chapter by cutting off both of his arms, stealing the product that Overhaul has worked tirelessly to create, just snatching that right in front of him, basically showing him that all the work that he was building up to was for naught, and he's about to take it all for himself. This is Shigaraki's chapter. I absolutely loved it, the art, and especially that last shot. That last panel of Shigaraki, Mr. Compress, and Dabi just walking away from all of the carnage, just from the trucks on the ground, the fire in the background. This was a chapter for the League of Villains. I'm glad we got it. It was a nice change of pace. But what this chapter shows is how quickly Shigaraki was able to just dispose of Overhaul just in one chapter alone. So I'm really excited to talk about what went down in this chapter, guys. So let's start back all the way at the beginning, and the first section I do want to talk about is just that cute Toga and Twice moment that we kind of had at the very beginning of this chapter. Toga looks absolutely amazing in the brief section we see her in this chapter. I'm not sure if it's just the way that Horikoshi just always draws this character. I always love her design, and I always love getting to see her pop up in the latest chapter. But we also have Twice / Jin here. He's in his civilian clothes, and right now he's basically freaking out. He's about to go schizophrenic. He's about to split, so he's basically incapacitated at the moment, and it's up to Toga to basically relay all the information to the League of Villains that are about to basically rendezvous with the police escorting the 8 Precepts of Death and also Overhaul. But as she's on the phone with Mr. Compress, we actually have a light moment here to where she actually apologizes to Mr. Compress, basically saying to him, "I'm sorry I asked you to give us a hand," because as we all know, Mr. Compress is kind of lacking a hand at the moment, or so it seems by the reveal at the ending of this chapter. But Mr. Compress kind of shrugs that off and just basically replies to her saying, "As long as you only need one." And we have this cute panel of Toga just basically laughing that off, looking adorable as always, basically escorting Jin by the hand, and lets our League of Villains know that even though they were unable to get a hold of Eri, the core child that everyone basically in this arc has been after, they do believe that the finished product of the quirk-removing bullets is in, the possession of the police that are currently escorting the 8 Precepts of Death and Overhaul to the villain hospital. So now that they have that information, that is basically the goal of the League of Villains and Shigaraki within this chapter, and they end up succeeding. So that's basically all that we kind of have with Toga and Twice within this chapter, and then we just move right into basically the highway fight, the highway battle with our League of Villains against the police. So we end up switching over to our armored car, our truck full of our League of Villain characters. Shigaraki, Dabi, Mr. Compress, and even Spinner is actually involved in this operation. So I'm really glad that we actually get to see Spinner in this chapter, and hopefully we kind of see him more as the story moves forward, because I kind of feel we don't really get enough of Spinner's character. But I love his moments in here where he's basically saying that he learned to drive by playing video games, and then just a little bit later on in the chapter ends up just shouting Grand Theft Auto at the most random random time. He bickers a little bit with Dabi in this chapter, but what I find fascinating with Spinner's character right now is that he's questioning why they are currently, attacking the police in this situation. And the way he's kind of viewing it as, the ultimate Stain fanboy that he is, considering the fact that he dressed up in Stain's attire, he's wondering how this actually aligns with Stain's ideology. But Shigaraki just calms him down and just saying this is a natural necessity, just stay on the course and continue to drive the truck. So I really do like that. But then we actually have a little battle on our hands with Shigaraki, Dabi, and Mr. Compress going up against a new hero that kind of gets introduced and defeated in one chapter. And this hero's name is Snatch, the Sand Hero. It's got a cool power. He kind of reminds me of Sandman, like the Spider-Man villain in the Spider-Man comics. It's kind of like the same power, but this section just goes to show the growth of our League of Villains because they make quick work of Snatch and also just the police in general. The way that Shigaraki is able just to jump and attack Snatch at the very beginning offset of this battle. And then thanks to Dabi and Mr. Compress, who was able to actually, flip the cars with a decompressed boulder and able to get it out of his magic ball and just kind of have this car pile up on the highway to where not only are the police cars incapacitated, but so are the armored trucks, basically escorting the 8 precepts of death and Overhaul. But we don't actually get to see the other 8 precepts of death. We only get to see Overhaul in this chapter, so I don't really know where the rest of Overhaul's underlings are in this police escort. But Dabi and Mr. Compress make very quick work of our Sand Hero, where Dabi basically engulfs him in his flames, and then Mr. Compress comes in and just compresses him down into his magic balls that is comprised with Dabi's flame. So we're basically left to assume that our Sand Hero that got introduced in this chapter is most likely dead. So our League of Villains are out for blood in this chapter, but that isn't even the crazy moments of this chapter, because after all is said and done, after the Sand Hero has been dealt with, we have our car pile up, the armored cars and police cars are basically incapacitated. We go into this section that is just basically a conversation with Shigaraki and Overhaul, and this is by far the best section of this week's chapter. You can tell that Shigaraki has been waiting for this moment ever since the beginning of this arc. Honestly, ever since he kind of met Overhaul. These guys do not like each other. So we see Shigaraki just basically knocking him out of his stretcher, out of the armored car. He's still contained with the handcuffs, so that way he can't activate his quirk, but Shigaraki is just talking down to him the entire time. He's basically looking at him and saying, you wanted to be the next overlord of all this? And Overhaul is looking at him, it's like, well, what are you going to do now? You going to kill me? And Shigaraki says, no, I'm not going to kill you. I have something far worse planned for you. I hate you. I always hated you because you were arrogant. And as he's talking and taking off the hand of his face, Mr. Compress just comes right in and just steals away one of Overhaul's arms. Right now, he's basically one-armed at the moment, and we get the reveal that Mr. Compress now has a new robotic arm, and he's telling Chisaki, I hate you too. Awesome moment right there, but the awesomeness and just the badassery does not just end there. Not only does Shigaraki now have in his possession the quirk-removing bullets, but he also ends up touching the other arm of Chisaki where it starts to crumble and disintegrate, and he's looking at that, it's like, we're gonna have to do something about that, because if that doesn't get cut off right now, the rest of you is just going to disintegrate as well. So he takes out a knife and cuts off the other arm of Chisaki. So right now, Chisaki has no arms. He cannot activate his quirk anymore. Right now, he's basically a powerless, helpless, quirkless man. This is basically just Shigaraki just getting the ultimate revenge on Overhaul. And I just love how Shigaraki is just relishing in this fact. But this panel on page 17 with Shigaraki's face drawn just so well in this panel, and as he's looking down at Overhaul, this line of dialogue I absolutely love by him, because he is just rubbing it right now in Overhaul's face. And he says this, you devoted your entire life to creating it, and now it's all mine. You can't even lift a finger, because you don't have any anymore. All you can do is look on in envy for the rest of your life. Good luck with that. This right here is basically Shigaraki's moment, and this kind of makes him MVP for this week's chapter. This is Shigaraki's chapter. I absolutely love just his overall demeanor, just the way he's actually able to get his revenge on Overhaul in this section, and he makes very quick work of Overhaul, considering our main heroes had such a hard time taking this character down. And in one chapter, Shigaraki is able to come in, cut off both of his arms, and basically leave him quirkless. But the only thing that I have kind of a question about this chapter is you would think Overhaul would be more upset and more in pain at the fact that he kind of lost both of his arms right here. The facial expressions he kind of has, it kind of just seems that he's kind of numb and just kind of in shock at all that is going on around him. And I don't think the pain right now has basically processed within him that he just lost both of his arms. But right now, he can't activate his quirk anymore. He is considered quirkless. We have Spinner basically yelling at our group like it's time to go. The reinforcements, the cops will be on us any minute. And then we're just left with this badass shot of Shigaraki, Dabi, and Mr. Compress just basically leaving the scene. We have the fire engulfing the background. They're walking away like some badass people in an 80s action movie where they don't look at the explosion or the fire in the background. Shigaraki puts the hand back on his face and they just continue on now that they've acquired the quirk removing bullets. I love this chapter. It's the second half of this chapter that makes it, and it's just the relishing that Shigaraki does at the fact at what he's been able to do to Overhaul in this chapter. So as you can tell, I thoroughly enjoyed this week's chapter. It was definitely a nice change of pace, definitely from the entire arc we kind of had being with our main heroes and just having one chapter centered around our League of Villains. But I definitely want to hear your guys' thoughts, theories, and opinions on this week's chapter. Did you guys enjoy just having one chapter dedicated to our League of Villains? Are you guys impressed with Shigaraki's character and the character growth that has definitely been shown with his character, that this is not the same character that attacked USJ at the very beginning arcs of My Hero Academia? And overall, who was your favorite character from the League of Villains that you got to see displayed very, very well in this week's latest chapter? And what do you think is going to happen with Overhaul? Obviously, there's a lot of questions, and I'm still wondering too if the arc is even done yet. Odds are we're going to switch back over with our main hero, seeing them in the hospital, recuperating, and we'll kind of get more of the fallout that kind of transpired with this entire arc to rescue Eri from Overhaul and his organization. But I'm really looking forward to chapter 161 coming out next week. So until then, guys, until chapter 161, I will talk with you guys later. See you guys.